Hi, it's Amory, and I am here with the February selection for Amory's Book Club, which is No Heaven for Good Boys by Keisha Bush. This book just came out today, so make sure you pick up your copy or order it, however you like to get it, but get it in your hands. This book is one of my favorite books of all time. It touched me, it grabbed me, it did not let me go. It's riveting, it's heartbreaking. I feel like so many books that we choose are heartbreaking, right? But because we're talking about so many truths and what human beings deal with, and that tends to be painful. But I love when books have a certain amount of hope in there, and there is hope in this story. When I read No Heaven for Good Boys, I couldn't read anything else for a few days. Immediately I planned to finish reading the book and then picking up something else and just like relaxing into the night, and I just could not. I wanted to let the feel of it linger. I didn't want to let it go. I wasn't ready to let the boys go. I wasn't ready to let the story go. I wasn't ready to let the way I felt go. And I didn't want to taint that feeling with any other story. And I felt that way for quite a few daes. No Heaven for Good Boys is about two Senegalese children. It's actually about a family, but it centers around a main character named Ibrahimah, who's a 6-year-old boy, and his cousin Étienne, and their parents. We see the story mainly through the eyes of the boys, but we also go back to their village, and we see what's happening with their families as the boys are in Senegal with a religious teacher. Now, a little bit of background. A young boy named Ibrahimah, who is 6 years old, who is sent to Dakar to live with a Muslim teacher, to be there for 1 year. Typically, boys would be there until their age of, I believe, 15 years old. But the Marabout says, I will bring him back. I know it sounds a little strange when I'm saying I will bring him back. There's a practice in Senegal, mainly the kids are Senegalese, in which young boys are sent to a religious teacher, a Muslim teacher, to learn about the Quran, and then they will return home later. There are many reasons for this. Some feel like is it economic hardship? Is it a lot, to be at home? But people push back on this and they say it's not really that. A lot of it has to do with West African traditions and raising your children and all of these other things. So that there's very debatable why this practice continues, but sometimes boys will leave their parents and they will go stay far away with a religious teacher for a number of years. No parental supervision or anything like that. These are called Talibé children or Talibé children. So the children are there, and there may be many boys. They're learning from their teacher about the Quran, and they are also begging in the streets for approximately 8 hours a day. They're begging in the streets for food and money. Typically it's going to be, sometimes it can be food, but really it's for money, to pay tithes to their teacher. You already know that scenario. I'm going to be very frank with you. I don't like that practice. I don't think it's a good idea at all. I don't care what country you live in, why you're doing it, what religion it is. Whenever you have children being sent to stay with one adult, and there are no other parents really around, I just feel like bad things can happen. Now, I will say, we have to be careful. When it comes to different cultures, we have to understand that when we see things and we see the world, we're making judgments based on our own cultural experience and our cultural beliefs. I will also say that we have to be cautious and make sure that we're not so afraid of offending or feeling like we're bringing our cultural beliefs onto someone else. This goes a lot with women's rights, children's rights across the world, female mutilation. We can go on, and there will be plenty of opportunities to say, well, I don't think it's my place to say anything. Oh, well, we shouldn't speak out against it because it's not our culture. And this is something we should be aware of. However, we do run the risk collectively as human beings, by fear of, being out of step or out of line. We run the risk of letting atrocities and abuse continue. So that's a little side note. It'll be great to have this conversation with Keisha Bush when we speak to her at the end of the month, because she did live and work in Senegal. All of that said, this particular Marabout, this particular religious teacher, is known to be quite abusive. He is emotionally abusive, he is physically abusive, and there are strong hints that the boys are also being sexually abused. And he just keeps collecting more boys because he has multiple wives in different places, and he just needs more money for his family. So we also see the story from his perspective too, and he is a despicable man. I still think it was great to be in his head because you understand what he's thinking and why he's thinking it, but he is a despicable man. So you have all of these children, and they have their own tomato can. If you go online, you will see pictures, and you will see them carrying around empty tins, empty tomato tins, and this is where they collect their money when they're begging in the streets. So Ibrahimah is sent against his mother's will to Dakar. He's 6 years old. He goes to stay. The teacher says that he will only keep Ibrahimah for 1 year because he knows how she's feeling. Now he has a cousin who's there already. He's 12 and he's supposed to stay until he's 15. So he's got 3 more years to go and then he can come home. And the boys want to run away, but many boys want to run away, but it's considered shameful to their families when they return because only the marabout is allowed to bring your child back. It's kind of like written in the code of how this works. And so if a child goes home, it's the parents' responsibility to berate them and send them back to the marabout. But the marabout does not bring back Ibrahimah after 1 year. He's just like, oh, he's my best student and I'll keep him. And I won't tell you too much, but in the story, we're just living with the boys. We're seeing what it is to be under such abusive conditions, but also what it is to just be a child and what they want and how they're playing, what their experience is like, you know, in the streets, how they can determine like who's going to give them money and how much, and all of these things that really kids shouldn't have to think about, but they have to be smart because this particular marabout does have a certain quota that the boys need to have or they'll be beaten when they return to their dwelling. There's so much here. Now I know this sounds fraught, and it is, but there's also humor because the boys are funny. So you won't read this and like cry. I say this because I know a lot of you may feel like you don't want to read more pain, more black pain in particular. I too like to avoid just steeping myself in it because of the state of the world and the way it's been. I was intrigued by the synopsis of the story. The cover won me over absolutely. The cover of the 2 boys, like it's just so, there's so much in that image. The emotions that you see of this image of the cover, that is what you feel when you're reading this book. You know what the book feels like by looking at this cover and looking at the 2 boys with their arms around one another. You do go through those hard times, you're going through those things, but you learn so much about them as they're going through their day-to-day life in the streets. You know, that I loved one particular instance in which a boy had cashews, and they're so sweet and so delicious, and then he had, I believe, 8. And so he shared them with someone else. He split them and gave him 4. And then that boy split his 4 and gave the next boy 2. And that boy gave from his 2, he split 1 and he gave 1 of the cashews to someone else, so they each had 1 and 1. And that was just so endearing. But again, heartbreaking because they're sharing food in such a way. They have to be careful because they can be beaten by other boys, and there's organ harvesting and all these things happening. Keisha Bush does such an excellent job of making these boys so real. They feel so incredibly flesh and blood. And I think one of the reasons, aside from her being a very talented writer, is that she did see this firsthand. She experienced this. And these boys are real. According to her author's note, there are over 100,000 Talibé boys living in Senegal and experiencing the abuse and impoverished conditions and all of these things. And so it's a very real thing. She also includes like ways to help too. I will do the same thing too in the liner notes and also here in this video where you can find out more information and help with organizations who are trying to help the children there. There is also a slight fantastical element, a little bit of magical realism. I'm telling you, coming from a black person and seeing again everything that's happening in the world, what we've experienced in the world in general, I was not mad at that level of hope. I needed that. I wish we could have a little bit of magical realism in everything that people are dealing with, that there could be a little bit of magical realism to not necessarily save the day. I would love it if it could, but even just give the feeling that things will be okay. And I needed that as a reader, reading this particular story. It is a beautiful story. It is heart-wrenching, but it is, I believe, eye-opening and possibly life-changing. And these characters will live with me forever. Étienne and Ibrahimah's mother, the way she was fighting for her child, she refused to give up. The way she fights for Ibrahimah in this story, the way she doesn't allow tradition to get in the way of her motherly instincts, the way she is doing anything that she can to get her child back. I love this story. Love this story. It is one of my all-time favorite books. Again, this book just came out today. I actually wanted to let you know about this book early instead of waiting until the 1st to do the announcement. I wanted to do it right now. Did it get too dark in here? Okay, we're good. I wanted to do this announcement right now because I want everyone to go out support this author, support Keisha Bush, support this story, this beautiful, beautiful story, and get your copy. We will be chatting with Keisha Bush at the end of the month. Bring your questions about the story itself, about writing craft, about the situation in Senegal regarding Talib children. Bring all of that, come with us, discuss it at the end of the month, and join the hashtags, hashtag Read with Amory, hashtag Amory's Book Club. Hit me on my IG at Amory, as well as the Amory's Book Club IG at Amory's Book Club, and make sure you follow along. Read this book, and yes, the book is deep. Yes, it's heart-wrenching, but I feel like she did a perfect job of balancing the pain with the humor, with the love, with the beauty of childhood and children, and again, that slight magical realism element that kept me afloat and gave me hope while I was reading. It's one of the most beautiful stories I've ever read, and I highly recommend it. So I will see you guys at the end of the month. Happy reading.